Okay, let's go.
All right, let's do it. Let me stop sharing my screen with our little wait message. All right, I'm going to keep an eye on that waiting room and keep letting folks in as they join us. But thank you all for joining us for Nominations 102. We are so glad that you are here. My name is Havila Havelka, and I am your conference training and resource specialist. I will be your host tonight, just managing the behind the scenes business of the workshop. Some of you also joined our Nominations 101, More Than a Methodist Shuffle workshop this fall. If you missed that opportunity, I am putting the YouTube link in the chat right now. That is not a prerequisite. Anyone is welcome to join tonight, but thought those of you who missed it might want to watch that later. I'd like to go over just a few housekeeping items before we get started. Several handouts are available for you in the Whova app. I will also share them on screen and in the chat tonight. So if you didn't get those from Whova before now, it's totally fine. We've got you covered. The session will last an hour to an hour and 30 minutes. Share your video if possible. We'd love this to be a conversation, especially since we're a smaller group tonight. When you're not talking, we'd ask that you remain on mute just to minimize distractions. We are recording this workshop, so folks who could not join us tonight will still be able to benefit from the training. But by staying on mute, you'll help make this a clean recording and remove unnecessary distractions. If you have any questions throughout the webinar, please feel free to unmute yourself to ask or post in the chat. There will be some group discussion tonight, so we hope that you'll engage. I'll be monitoring the chat and we'll stop periodically to ask any questions that show up there. Our presenter tonight is the Reverend Dr. Mary John Dye. Mary John is a retired elder and former district superintendent for our conference. She has served a wide range of church communities, and she just brings a wealth of knowledge and education and experience to our conversation tonight. We are so grateful, Mary John, that you continue to minister and give so graciously of your time and wisdom, even in retirement. So now I'm going to hand the mic over to you. Please join me in welcoming the Reverend Dr. Mary John Dye.
Thank you. I am flunking retirement and I love, of all the groups that I have worked with through the years, I love nominations and lay leadership and believe that this group is really at the heart and soul and core of health in our churches. I mean, I believe that with all my heart. It's the only group that affects every leadership group in the church. So I cannot overestimate the value of the work you do, because our denomination is a denomination that is based on decisions being made by elected leaders. So who you name to those groups are, I mean, there's no way to describe how really important that is. I would like for us to start with scripture. And there are several scriptures that really fit well. And I'd like for you to kind of read with me. Havila's going to put them up on the thing. It doesn't work well for you to audibly read with me. It does all this bouncing around like echoing. But I'd like for you to read where you are with me, because these are really important guides for us. But speaking the truth in love. Ooh, let me say that part again. But speaking the truth in love, we must grow up in every way into him who is the head, into Christ. Now, there are varieties of gifts, but the same Spirit. There are varieties of services, but the same Lord. There are varieties of activities, but it is the same God who activates all of them in everyone. To each is given the manifestation of the Spirit for the common good. Thank you. And one more. Let us hold fast to the confession of our hope without wavering, for he who has promised is faithful. And let us consider how to provoke one another to love and good deeds, not neglecting to meet together, as is the habit of some, but encouraging one another, and all the more as you see the day approaching. Thank you. I think those scriptures kind of launch and encapsulate the importance of what we do. Now, pastors and the lay members of committees on nominations usually associate their work with late summer, early fall, getting ready for charge conference, to have a slate of officers to be approved for the next calendar year. And that's why we did session 101 the end of August of last year. And without a doubt, that is core time for this group. But that's why this January section is not a repeat of what we did then, which focuses on, enlisting and engaging people to serve as officers of your church. I'm not going to repeat that, although some of you are bound to be new or maybe new to your committee, as in January, there was a whole new slate that took office. So if you're new to the committee, would you raise your hand and let me see? Thank you. Well, thank you. Your work is so very important. And go back and before the fall, good. So anytime before the fall, go back and look at what we did the last Sunday of August that Havilah keeps putting up, and it'll be continuously available, because that is guidance for the specific task of enlisting people and a process that will help you, in regard to that. So, but what we're doing now has to do with the ongoing and very important work of recruiting lay leaders for the church. And because when we only deal with it, getting ready for church conference, sometimes we forget what we're going to be sharing tonight. And if we'll do this part right, then you'll find that your work in the fall will be much more effective. And it will be easier, trust me. So let's talk first about enlisting and engaging officers. And if you will, I'm happy for you to participate with me. I don't do this because I love to hear the sound of my voice, but I do want you to think about what makes it harder and harder to enlist and engage leaders. Your work is not easy. And 10 or even 20 years ago, the nature of this work was very different. So I'm going to invite you to brainstorm with me. And will you put in the chat, why is it that you think it is hard? So I have been saying for about 10 years that it is 7 to 10 times harder to staff our churches with lay leadership than it was 15 years ago. Now, why would I say that? You can unmute and say something or put something in the chat. You want me to get you started? I'm not trying to put anybody on the spot.
We have busy schedules in the chat.
That's right. We do. We have very busy schedules, and people have less discretionary time, even people who are retired. The estimate now for discretionary time that people have available to give to non-family or non-work situations is an hour and a half a week. You have meetings that last longer than that. I mean, let's just tell the truth. But the significant involvement in the church takes time, and people have less and less discretionary time to give. What else? They're discouraged and not sure they know how to do the job. Thank you, Diane. Yes. And a lack of understanding why serving on committees, lots of distractions and interruptions each day. Perfect. Great. And Havilah is going to capture some of these for us. Change in memberships, less people to do the same amount of work and more work if we're going to need to grow and do things differently. That's very, very significant. Good job. What else? Bystander rather than participant. Yep. We like to be served in this consumer culture, right? I do. I go out to eat a lot just so somebody will wait on me and give me what I want and say no problem and not argue with me about things. Okay. Sometimes a lack of confidence in the pastor to ask. Ooh, okay. All right. Thank you. That's really important. All of those things are great. There are lots of personal pressures that people don't want to get involved with the inner working of the church. It's too political. Oh dear. Or there is conflict. I mean, we know there's conflict in the culture. It doesn't matter, how harmonious your church is. There is tremendous conflict in the culture, which is getting more and more baked in. And when that happens, a lot of times people will back away. Okay. So we need, for example, let's just talk about something simpler like teaching Sunday school. When I was growing up in the church, we would have Sunday school teacher who would commit to a certain class, and then we would have a substitute. Do you all have any Sunday school classes that just have one teacher and maybe a substitute? Most of the classes of the churches that I've been in for the last 15 years have had somebody will take one Sunday a month. So you need to recruit 4 teachers, instead of one and a substitute. And they swap off at any given or a service function, like ushers. I used to know who the ushers were every single Sunday. For the last 10 to 12 years, I have no idea who's going to be the usher. They may have worked it out, they may not. But it has to do with people come to church when they don't have something else to do, or something else hasn't come up. And I don't mean like a sickness in a family, which you always might have, but all kinds of things are distractions, like somebody has already named for us. And so the work of doing the lay staffing of the church gets much more complicated. And some of you may have chaired other committees in the church. And the extent of participation from people who are on committees has gone lower and lower and lower because things come up. So you can set your meetings and you can announce them ahead, but you may or may not get a full contingent of really good people. I mean, we're not talking about good and bad people. They're all good people, committed to the church, but there is just so much going. So it's this constant juggle. And so how do we identify and attract and support people to serve their church? Because I assure you, it is the quality of lay leadership that makes or breaks a church. I'm a big fan of clergy, being one myself. My father was one. My grandfather was one. I've got a daughter who's one. I mean, they're all over my family. I'm a big fan of clergy. We cannot do all this work. We cannot. And as we itinerate, the stability of lay leadership becomes all the more important. And so your work, I'm telling you, congratulations that you said yes. Now you may be thinking, what did I say yes to? Which means I'm really happy you're here, because I can tell you, and it's exciting work and it's great. It's great work. But say yes to this task that has a greater importance than ever before. It also has challenges like never before. And that's why we're doing this. That's why we did the session in August that's available. And that's why we're going to do this. And I'm going to take time all along the way to ask you if you've got questions, or don't hesitate to raise your hand and just ask out loud. I am eminently interruptible. And I know where I'm going, so I will hopefully not be distractible. Okay. So I want to talk beyond what we did in August, in supplement to, not in place of, but in supplement to about the very important work of equipping leaders. Somebody said people don't know what to do. So I'd like for you to repeat a phrase after me. And this is the phrase: I don't really know what I'm supposed to do in this position. I'm going to say it one more time, then I want you to say it where you are. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do in this position. Okay, ready? Let's say it. I don't really know what I'm supposed to do in this position. Now, let's work hard to never say that again or never hear that again. That is our great goal. You know, every time it happens, every single time it happens, it makes it harder for you to enlist and engage people in leadership in the church. Now, back in August, I said, tell anybody who you are asking to serve in a position what that position involves. Don't surprise them, by reading their name on a list later, but you tell them what it involves, and you tell them that we need them to pray about it. And they should agree to it before they accept nominations. And I'm sure that 100% of the 150 people who participated in August did exactly that, right? But it's a long, lazy pattern in the church. It's a long, lazy pattern to ask people to serve on something without explaining what that means. Now, some of you are going to say, but if I really explained it, they would never say yes. And that may be true, that church work is hard. So the first thing is that you, as members of the Committee on Nominations and Lay Leadership, you need to be clear about how the United Methodist Church works and its basic structure. Now, I have two handouts to show that. One is with words, because I love words, which talks about the administrative groups of the church, and then the program. No, Havel, if we can go back to the graphic one first, that would actually be great. Thank you. So, if you'll follow me on this, the heartbeat of a church is worship. And the most important functions of the church are the areas of nurture, outreach, and witness. Now, the discipline doesn't define how we do that. So your churches may all do that in a different way. The discipline only says that every church shall have a program of nurture, growing together in faith, outreach, sharing God's love through mission in the world, and witness, that is, inviting, attracting, and engaging new people for Christ. But all of that, the heartbeat of church is worship. Now, there are 4 administrative groups. All of them are in service of nurture, outreach, and witness and worship. Now, you may find some finance people that think they're the most important group in the church. Now, I've already told you that you are the most important group of our administrative groups in the church. But we have finance, staff, parish nominations, and trustees who take care of necessary functional work. They are not doing it for themselves. They are doing it for the sake of the witness and the strength and the health of the church. Everybody relates then to the church council, which is also allowed a great deal of latitude in terms of its composition and function. You may have a great big one, you may have a small one, but everybody relates to somebody. So we have groups that are designed to organize so that this is a gift for the whole membership, so that the membership can focus on making disciples for Jesus Christ, because that's our main goal. And that means that I call the people in these groups, the administrative groups, the designated warriors. That is, if the toilet breaks down, everybody in the church doesn't need to get upset about that. They need to keep making disciples for Jesus Christ, because we've got designated warriors. They're called trustees, and they're going to take care of it. And if people resign from certain positions or have to drop out, we have designated warriors for lay to make sure that our lay vacancies are filled. So God bless our designated warriors, but they're not ends of themselves. Pastors, I mean, if you're worried about your pastor or your staff, they need help, you don't need to be running around telling the whole church how terrible the pastor is. I wouldn't want to do that anyway, I'm sure. But anyway, I'm just saying the whole church needs to be focused on making disciples for Jesus Christ, because we got designated warriors to make sure that staff, pastors, get the kind of guidance they need for the most effective leadership of the church. Finance is the same way. It is a gift to people that we are organized the way we are. And that means that this leadership, and you name the leadership for all of these groups, they do the church at service, but it is in service of keeping the whole membership focused on our primary task. Now, I'm not going to ask you to raise your hand or put in the chat the many different times that you know of people where this got off track. This is the track. Do you hear me? So that when we ask people to serve on finance, that's going to be their focus. And they're going to let other people do their jobs. And people need to stay in their lanes. You know, I've just finished an interim at Blair Road in Charlotte, which I loved, except that I drove down I-77 and then I hit 485. And dear friends, it's the wild, wild west on 485 North in Charlotte. If you've never been on it, I mean, there are lots of lanes, but people are zigging and zagging. I was always prayed up when I got to the church. But it was, people need to stay in their lanes. And people in churches need to stay in their lanes. And you are picking leadership for all of these groups. That's your job. And so look for people who are competent, who are caring, who are devoted, but people who will stay in their lanes. So no group stands alone. Every group is important. Every group is accountable. And then I've done this again, Havilah, if you'll switch to the other one for you to have, just as this is just kind of a cheat sheet of administrative decision groups, so that when you come to your job later of actually naming, and your specifics on this may vary, like your trustees may meet every month, I don't know. I've tried to put in the disciplinary things, and you may have other groups that meet. Some churches have a barbecue committee, for example, or some churches have a daycare board, and other churches may not. So this isn't like the perfect, but this is an outline to tell you what they do, who they relate to, and you should at least know this. This is to equip you for, you know, what's coming up, and you need to adapt it to your own church. So that would be great for you to do. So you become the key to seeing that everybody understands that we have an efficient way to help the whole congregation stay focused on making disciples for Jesus Christ. Now, in United Methodist faith, you also understand that we believe it's not our church, right? I mean, it's not our church. We've had a lot of trouble with that. It's God's church, and it has been given in trust to us. And I don't know about you, but I take care of things that are given in trust to me. God has given the church in trust to us. Now, we exemplify that by our buildings actually being in trust with the annual conference. They're not owned by the annual conference. They are in trust to us. So God has trusted us with this great ministry. And that is the structure in terms of generally how we operate. You'll need to adapt it to your church, whether it's larger or smaller. It may have things that are different, but that's the general structure. And that's a gift to help equip you for what's coming up. Anybody have any questions about that? Okay, I'm going to keep giving you a chance to ask questions. So you not only need to be clear about the structure of United Methodist, but at least you need to know the structures. If people say to you, well, if you're asking me to be on staff parish, what does that mean? Please don't say, I don't know. You need to know, and have a way to resource people. So you need to know this basic structure first. But the second thing that I think is critical is you need to be fluent about United Methodist faith. We have, from the time of John Wesley, been very respectful of people who are in other areas of the Christian family. That includes people who are very different in terms of what they believe and how they practice. And we, as John Wesley followers, have never been antagonistic. We have not been self-righteous about who we are, but we need to be who we are, right? So if we are going to be United Methodist churches, and praise God, we need to know what United Methodist faith is about. And so we have now a handout for you of this. I mean, this is like really quick, but this is the foundation of United Methodist faith. And the bottom of it is like, it's our anchor and it's our foundation. We are a John 3:16 church. We believe that God loved the whole world, and we are committed to that. We are committed to reaching out to sinners, to welcome sinners, not just some sinners, but our passion is to reach the world with the saving love of Jesus. And so we reach out to everybody. We do what Jesus did. That is our base, for United Methodists. That is our uncompromised baseline. We believe in the priority of grace. I mean, if there is an answer to what is United Methodist faith about, friends, the answer is always grace. I mean, John Wesley's whole theology has to do with grace. Now, that is a great gift to people, because we're living in a very judgmental world. I mean, everybody's got an opinion of everything. If one wrong thing happens in a wrong statement is made out of 25 statements, people will pick on that one thing. We live in a judgmental world. And so grace is a breath of fresh air. And we've got to know that that's the essence of who we are. And because we have received grace, we don't withhold grace from other people. That there's something really wrong about that. So we believe in grace in a judgmental world. We believe in Christian assurance. This is one of the John Wesley distinctives. We lead by assurance, not by fear. Now, we live in a fear-driven world. Our whole economy works on making you afraid that something terrible is going to, and the news, oh my gosh, the news is on steroids about all kinds of crazy things that might happen or possibly could happen. Or, dear Lord, we live in a fear-driven world, but United Methodists are people who lead by assurance. Not the assurance that everything's okay, but the assurance that God is working in our heart to give us peace. I'm not going to preach on this, but this is really important. And you watch how the rest of the world lives on fear, thrives on fear. Did you hear what happened? And we not only are afraid of things that have happened, we're afraid of things that might happen. It is a fear-saturated world that United Methodism has a real gift to give. A quick story for me is I had a little girl come up to my parsonage in Charlotte and knock on the door. I thought she was selling something, cookies or fruit for the band, or I don't know what. But I'm a soft touch for kids that have to sell things for school or for their scouts or whatever. And so I answered the door, and she looked really nervous, and she said, "Ma'am, if you died tonight, are you sure you're going to heaven?" And I said, "Yes, honey, I am." Well, that really messed her up. That apparently was not the answer. She said, "Are you really sure that you would go to?" Yes, honey, I am. Well, then she was completely flustered. She turned around to the lady who was standing at the curb, evidently to, encourage her. That woman kind of said, be strong. And so she said, ma'am, I just have to say, are you sure that you're sure? And I hated to disappoint her. I kind of felt like I was giving the wrong answer because she was really disappointed. But I said, oh, honey, yes, I absolutely am sure. And she didn't know what to do then. She just walked off. We don't lead by fear. I didn't go into I'm a United Methodist pastor, and John Wesley believed in Christian assurance, that we can know in our hearts that God loves us and will stand by it. I spared her that, but I was sure. I'm a United Methodist, and we lead by assurance, not fear. We lead by continual growth of holiness. John Wesley called it moving on to perfection. This is what you're doing tonight. Good job. Moving on to perfection, being made perfect in love, sanctifying grace is what John Wesley called this. There is always more to learn. There's always more to learn in terms of the Bible. There's always more to learn in terms of best practices. And we, as United Methodists, we will wear you out with training opportunities and Bible studies and cohorts. And we will flat wear you out with opportunities to grow in grace, because we are passionately committed to continually grow. We should be better Christians today than we were a year ago. I'm not asking if you were, I'm not, but I'm just saying I should be a better Christian this week than I was last week, because I'm a United Methodist. There's something exciting and vital about that. And we're unapologetic about that. And the other part of the foundation is we have both and living. We don't say, well, the children in our church are important, because you know what people are going to say. Well, what about senior citizens? We don't do that. They're all important. We don't ask people to make those kinds of decisions that create divisions. We're all for it. Bible study and social action, spiritual growth and reaching out in the community, the head and the heart. We don't understand, but our world is full of saying, you decide, you're for this group or that group. You're for immigrants or veterans. Don't y'all see those posts all the time? It drives me crazy. But we are living in a world that pushes false and partial choices. United Methodist faith is always both and. John Wesley believed in education and study, and he believed in personal enthusiasm and experience. We are both and people. Now, the reason this is important, and you can take that down now, Havila, thank you, is that we have a faith to be proud of. And people who lead in United Methodist churches ought to know United Methodist faith, and not get drawn away and distracted by other. We need to be who we are. We don't need to put other people down. We don't need to argue about other people, but please put people in touch and listen for. We got a lot of people who are not United Methodists that come to United Methodist churches. Let me say that as a description, not as a criticism. But I'm inviting you to make sure that the people that you pray about to nominate as leaders are people who are, I don't care how they grew up, but that they understand that that's the core of United Methodist faith. Those are the basic precepts. There are all kinds of variations and little things, but all of those things that I list in that handout, they're really important. And all of our people ought to know them, but certainly anybody that's going to be an officer needs to be somebody who's proud of who we are as United Methodists. And my belief is that for all the people who are leaving the church or disillusioned with the church or discouraged with the church, they will find a life-giving faith in United Methodism. I think the world is spiritually hungry as it has never been before. That's just one person's opinion, and we have that kind of faith to offer. So when we get crazy and being less than who we are giving away a great legacy. So I'd encourage you to take that. I want your committees to have it. I want your congregations to have it. These are core things about who we are. And I don't need to criticize people who are from other branches of the family. I'm just saying people who lead our churches ought to be United Methodist. And then the one other thing that I want to say is that you are the group of people to be aware that United Methodists have a passion for training, ongoing, regular training, just like this, and that there are resources available to any individual or any group in your church from our connection. So put people in touch. If they don't know what their position is, call me. I got a bunch of people you could call, or go to the online learning platform. I mean, we have a host of people who would love to come to talk about the importance of the role of any one of these groups. And our passion to train, it not only gives people practical help, but it gives them hope and it gives them meaning for their work. So we don't let people flounder. And it's your job to not let people flounder. So there are online resources, there's district resources, conference officers, written material, other clergy. I mean, there are a zillion of me. They're not quite all like me, but I'm just saying there's a zillion of other clergy who would love to come and sit down with your groups or your individuals. We provide a feast of resources for our leaders. I mean, it is like the best potluck you have ever been to. I mean, it is, it's a spread. It's not quite the heavenly banquet, but by golly, if you go away hungry, it is your own fault. Nominations and nominations teams and their pastors should make sure that the people who are leaders of their church know there are resources for them that are general construct, but they're also very practical. And it really is like people kind of floundering around when there's a ton of help, and we want to help. We're big on connection, and the help is close by. So let me just say, nominations people need to know that. You need to reassure others about it and take advantage of it, and people will help you make those direct connections. So if you've got particularly some really capable people in your church, you say, well, I'm just not sure what it involves. Ooh, we can tell you, and then say yes or no. But nominations people need to be really committed to this, that there's this great, wow, banquet of resources available for anybody. Questions? Are you with me? Thumbs up. Are you not with me? Tell me to go another way. So those are things for nominations. You need to know the structure, general structure of the church. You need to know it before you ask people to fit in. The second is you need to know the basics of United Methodist faith, so that we are calling forth United Methodist faith believers to United Methodist leadership. And you need to know there's help. There's help everywhere. After the August workshop, I had at least 20 people who followed up with me to say, well, let me tell you about the situation in my church. Now, I don't have just the answers for everybody, but I've been in ministry 50 years. I was raised as a Methodist PK. I still don't know everything, but I'm just telling you, I can help. We learn stuff along the way. That's the point. And when we can put that to a practical way to help others, it's a thrill for us. It's an absolute thrill. So those are things that at least can equip you for your work. And I have one other thing that I think is really important for nominations people to do. And that is to talk about the essential responsibility and joy of encouraging leaders in our churches. Now, I wanted to know if you can help me with this other thing. I want to talk about what are the things that make church leadership discouraging these days? Some of the same maybe as what you said earlier. Havilah, do you think can we try a word cloud or not?
We can, absolutely. Let me get that link.
So the idea for this is that you're going to say things and Havilah's going to work some magic and we'll put it in a graphic that then we can make available to you.
Yes, I'll share a link in the chat and folks can actually add their own
goodness sakes.
Their own ideas. Yeah.
Okay.
Do you want single word or kind of open-ended multiple word answers?
Well, you know me, I never do well with a single word.
Okay, let's do open-ended.
But if you have a single word, by all means, you just kick it right in there. But I'm not exactly sure how this happens, but that's why we have help, which Havilah is providing. So what is discouraging about church leadership these days? Anybody can start. In fact, if you start, somebody won't take your thing. I have a whole list.
Okay, I just put the link in the chat. If you go there, you should be able to offer your answers. If you put it in the chat, I will add it in there for you.
Too many meetings. Amen. And what else about meetings? How long are they? Short meetings? Are they meaningful meetings? They last forever. And they run all around. You can't put that in the word cloud, but yes, too many meetings and meetings that are too long. What else?
Yes, let me share my screen so you can see the answers that are coming in live. We also have conflict and lack of clarity.
Yeah, put conflict down there several times. Okay. Yeah, that's right. And while you're thinking, I'm not trying to undo your thinking, but a climate of constant criticism is affecting us in some really important ways. Some of you are as old as I am, maybe not, but you can remember when we lived in a world where people smoked in public places. Y'all remember that? You'd go into a restaurant and it'd be full of smoke. And you could not help but breathe in the smoke. You know, when that was the case. I mean, it's different now. Although I'm from Kentucky and the tobacco industry is really big there, and they swore it would shut down restaurants and everything to ban smoking in public places, and it didn't. But it made a difference if somebody was smoking or groups of people were smoking in an open area. The same thing is true with conflict. When there's conflict that you hear nothing but conflict on the news, this person says this and this person says that, and blah, 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 not to mention political, different perspectives. Conflict is really discouraging. Okay, thank you. What else? Some fail to see why nominations is important. I'm with you. Tell them to call me, Ronnie, or let me come talk to them. Yeah. Okay, what else? All right, I want you to keep writing, but I'm gonna put some things that I've got. I've got the need to do things differently and the universal resistance to doing anything different. Our churches aren't going to survive without learning to do things differently. I mean, that's just a reality. And anytime you want to do things differently, there's going to be resistance to that. I think a lot of times it's discouraging because people hardly know where to start because so much needs to be done. Whether it's with a Christian education program or a witness program or implementing any kind of fundamental initiative. Do you need to start a different kind of worship service or whatever? I think sometimes people are just paralyzed, not knowing what to do that would be effective and not knowing how to field the criticism that will come from doing it. Not sure what will work and not work. So how many of you know that it's discouraging to have fewer people to do the work? People who are less available. I'm not saying that they're less committed, but they're certainly less available with fewer financial resources. Is that discouraging to anybody? You got to be with me on that. So I also think that it's very discouraging. Some just don't want to get involved. Yeah. Finding the best leaders and then getting the best leaders to agree, getting them equipped. But I just think a lot of it is keeping them motivated and encouraged. I am not sure that there has ever been a more discouraging day to serve in the church. I'm not sure there's a day that hasn't been more important or with more promise, but it's also very discouraging. It's very discouraging. So on one hand, people are watching online. Yay. On the other hand, they're not there. They're not there for you to see. And they're not there to say, good sermon, or they're not there to smile at the person who's just gotten a terrible diagnosis. And they're not there to put their arms around somebody who needs the peace of Christ. It's hard. It is really, really hard. And let me just say, when we're talking about encouraging leaders, I want you all to encourage each other in your nominations group. I want you to encourage your pastors too. There's not a one of us that is in this work to be thanked. I mean, anybody would be a fool to go into the ministry to be thanked. We go into the ministry because God's called us. But it's a hard time right now. It's a hard time right now. And we are, as an institutional church, we're struggling in what was a predictable struggle. Back when I was on the cabinet, we were taking the work of Dr. Lovett Weems from the Wesley Center, at Wesley Theological Seminary. And he was saying, we've got to get new people, we've got to get more diverse people, and we've got to get younger people. Because this is going to sound terrible. Y'all are going to wish you weren't on this call. But he said there's a death tsunami coming to the church that was going to begin in 2017. And that was just taking the median age of United Methodists, which at that time was 68. And he said, we can't continue. We will not. It's not saying anything ugly about anybody. It's not saying anything about their devotion, but they're going to die. And as long as our churches are focused only on that group of senior citizens, they're going to be in trouble in terms of attendance. They're going to be in terms of trouble financially. So anyway, here we are. It's 2024, and Lovett's right. Many of you have already begun to feel the impact of what he stunning graphically called the death tsunami. And that is stressful and it's painful. And we in the church all my life just thought things would just keep going the way they were. Well, they won't. That ain't going to happen. And so it is discouraging. It's disheartening. And many of our young people, they tell us that 8 out of 10 of the young people raised and confirmed in the church will not stay in the church by the time they're 30. And I don't know how to cope with that myself, but it's discouraging at the very least. And so it's hard. It's hard to be a leader. So you're asking people, it's a big ask for them to be a leader in your church. And it will take big hearts on your part and lots of wisdom on your part to step forward, to know never has there been a more important time to support and encourage leaders. And never has it been more important to have leaders who are committed to our churches. So I guess one of the things that you would need to do both individually and in your groups is think of, how do we create a climate in our church of goodness and appreciation? How will we know when our church is healthy and dynamic and engaging? So I want to share with you one other handout, and that is, this is a marvelous compilation of characteristics of a healthy congregation. It's called the Culture of Goodness handout. Here we go. So every family and church and organization, you have individuals who are good people who show God's heart. But families and churches and organizations can become hurtful and damaging and toxic when the culture or the common ways that people act are not healthy. So we always want individuals to seek holiness of heart and life. But until our churches cultivate characteristics of God's goodness, when the culture is negative and not uplifting, it is going to have an effect on people. So a healthy church depends on a healthy climate, just like smoking and non-smoking. So here are the characteristics of a healthy congregation. This comes from a book called A Church Called Tove, T-O-V, which by Scott McKnight and Laura Behringer, his daughter, which I think is wonderful. And I encourage you to read it. The word Tove, this is written by an Old Testament professor. And Tove is the Hebrew for good. Like in the creation story, God said, that's good. So don't let the title throw you off. But it is anyway, the essential characteristics of a healthy congregation are these that you can recognize. That there's an unwavering commitment to God's way over our preferences. We are living in a world where people think their preferences are mandates and everybody has to do it their way. But the Christian life, we have always believed, John Wesley, his covenant prayer, I am no longer my own but thine. Put me to what thou wilt. Rank me with whom thou wilt. Put me to being, put me to doing, put me to suffering. United Methodists have always known it's about God's way, not about our way. So a healthy church doesn't build itself around personal preferences, not even the personal preferences of a pastor or staff or any leader. Look out for people who think their way is the only way. No family. I'm maybe stepping on some toes, but any family, it doesn't matter how long they have been there, or how much money they have. Everybody in a healthy church sacrifices their preferences for the sake of the good. And the good of all, like we said in the scripture at the very beginning. And this is got to be the goal. And nominations, you can name people all you want to, but until you've got a church that cares first about God's way, until you've got leaders who want to be in sync with God more than they want to get their way, you're going to be swimming upstream. Somebody have a question where I can pause for? Pamela, is there a question that
Yes, I was trying to find my unmute while I was
Oh,
sharing. We had a question about some of the well, some of them are discouraging, but some of the statistics that you've been sharing. Is there a resource or something you can point folks to be able to capture those statistics later?
not that I can think of off the top of my head.
Okay.
I mean, these are things I've learned in workshops, and uh, let me I'd have to follow up with that. I don't know them off the top of my head. I know they're pretty terrible, aren't they? I believe they're true though, and I think the Pew Research Index is showing this more and more. That's one resource. Lovett Weems has done exemplary work on that at the Lewis Center at Wesley Seminary, but I would have to look harder for that. Okay. All right. Then members of a healthy church have empathy for others and not an atmosphere of judgment and criticism. Now, this is really, really hard in our judgmental culture. Very hard. But listen for the atmosphere in your church. Is it grace-filled or criticism-filled? So, grace is a major character. It's major for United Methodist, but if you want to look for an atmosphere where people are willing to work, and feel like they're going to have half a chance to exercise their gifts, you got to look for grace. Speaking the truth and challenging falsehoods. Now, this is a really hard one in this world. And I have served 2 churches within the last year that have been through the disaffiliation process. And I have listened to the grief of members who have said over and over again, I wish I had spoken up more. So, do people in your church speak for truth? And do they challenge things that are false? Do they stand up for justice? And do they speak out against wrongdoing, no matter who is doing it? Now, that becomes really important, because when something wrong is being done by somebody who is near and dear to you, my experience of church people is that they tend to let it go. They'll call me after the meeting and say, oh, this person shouldn't have done that. But I want to suggest that if somebody near and dear to you is doing something wrong at church, then you are really the best one to have a chance to say something to them that they might listen to. A healthy church protects hurting individuals, not the group or the institution at the expense of people who have been hurt. I could talk all night about the ways that we have not done that. Accountability of Christian behavior is applied to everybody, not just one or two. I mean, pastors ought to be accountable. I'm a big fan of that, but it's not just the pastor. And then service to others. Are we oriented to serve and help others? So take those things and understand that there's no individual, and there's certainly no church that's perfect. There are shortcomings everywhere. Everybody has a blind spot. And at our best, we use these hallmarks that I've listed, or he's listed here, as a way to self-correct. Because at times everybody gets caught up in drama or whatever. I'm just saying, your best leaders are going to want to serve in a church that's healthy, where they are, as I've just said, going to have a chance to do their work, to make a difference, to have people cooperate and learn and grow together. And so you, as a committee of nominations, you have a direct interest in making sure that you do what you can, no magic wands, but that you do what you can to see that your church has the characteristics of health. Now, Dr. McKnight says that it takes intentional effort of 5 to 7 years to actually build a community that's healthy. And so get started. That's all I know to say. But the more we can do this, the more quickly people are going to be willing to step forward in leadership for your church. So I think that's one of the other things that I'd like to leave with you as a challenge is what can you do to help reinforce, maybe reintroduce healthy characteristics into your church culture? What can you do as individuals, but what can you do as a group? And, honestly, I've had times in churches where people have been going at each other, and really it needs to be the committee on nominations who says in the church council or wherever, y'all, nobody's ever going to want to work in this church if we don't get this stuff worked out. I mean, we have an opportunity to self-correct, and we can and we should, and that's God's way. So that maybe feel like it's a huge challenge. And I don't have a test for you to rank your church or that on any of those things, but I'm just going to leave that with you, because if the culture is toxic, you're going to have a really hard time getting healthy leaders who want to give what discretionary time they have to leading your church. So you've got a vested interest in a healthy culture in your church.
Mary John, we've got a hand raised by Dana Hicks.
Great.
Hi, Mary John. Actually touched on what was on my mind is how do we assess? The 5 to 7 years is fine, but how do you assess where the church is in that journey, or where a person is in that journey?
Well, and I'm not sure I know the answer to that, except that I would make that a part of a discussion with a nominating committee, which would include your pastor. You have many pastors, but I'm just saying, whoever leads your group, to just say, where do you think we are?
Yeah.
I mean, with the checklist. The reason that I say I think this is better as a group discernment is that we all have had experiences which might skew negatively or positively what a good, I mean, that's why we do things as groups. And hopefully our groups are diverse enough to be representative of different areas of the congregation. So you might have senior citizens who go, oh yeah, we're very healthy. And then you might have the younger people in the group saying, well, not so much, So, I mean, I think at number one, it has to be individualized for church, because churches are so different. Churches are complex and varying, but the more input you get, then the more awareness you take out. Meaning, if you would have a discussion about that, then you'll think about things that you haven't thought about before, if going out of that meeting. And I don't think you go looking for negative qualities will come find you. Don't go looking for anything negative. That's what the world does. But you'll recognize it when it comes, and you'll recognize it for the way it complicates your work and it keeps the church from being its best. So I'd say it would be an ongoing discussion. Is that helpful to you at all?
Yeah, absolutely. Again,
I mean, I don't think somebody can come in from the outside, and assess things like that. I think it ought to include the pastor, but it ought to include the lay leaders. And just see where you start. And what can you learn, and what, if anything, can you do about it? Sometimes, particularly as we go into an election year where everything gets on steroids, we face some pretty bad headwinds, So I'd suggest that be a discussion. Good luck.
Thank you.
Well, and I'd love to hear if people actually do it, and does it help? Or is that more discouraging? I don't want to do anything that's more discouraging to you. We used to laugh in seminary about it was not a true story, I don't think, about the pastor who thought they could save anybody, and somebody was about to jump off a bridge, and the pastor said, "No, please let me listen," and walked out on the bridge, and the person confided in him, and then they both jumped. I mean, that's not funny. It was just trying to save us from the savior complex, but we don't want to do things that discourage everybody even more. This is a path out, meaning there are healthy characteristics we can measure if we're doing them or not, and then we can say, how do we work toward the healthy comments? But the other thing that I'd like for you to think about is, and I really do believe this, developing cultures that are healthy. I would say cultures that are consistent with United Methodist faith. I think this is critical. And lots of good people will get hurt when we don't focus on that. I also think that there are other ways. I've never known nominating committees to intentionally take on the challenge of encouraging their leaders. You invite them to take a job. If they're lucky, you tell them what the job is. If they're luckier, you tell them about their smorgasbord of resources that are available to them. But this is what I'm asking. Do you pray for them? Do you have prayer partners among your committee on nominations, or a prayer team in the committee on nominations who will be intentional about praying for every new officer, for example? 2024, you start a new slate. Should be 2/3 of our standing committees. It should be 2/3 people who have been on it and 1/3 people who are new. Could you at least pray for the people who are new? Could you at least be intentional about praying for the chair people of those committees? I said back in August, do not, several people called me later, do not nominate people to be on committees who do not get along well with others. Do not do it. Because when you do that, the chair of that committee, you talk about discouraging, the chair of that committee has to deal with that person for the next 3 years. Don't do it. You can stop that. You can find places of service. You can find all kinds of things for them to do. But I'm just saying, holy cow, don't contribute to the discouragement of your leaders. So can you pray at least for the leaders of your groups in an intentional way? Or can you, I don't think it was United Methodist who started Pastor Appreciation Month, but whatever. Could the nominating committee be a place where you have laity officer appreciation? Could you send them notes? Or at least when they do something, whether it ended up being successful or not, could you be the ones to say thank you? We appreciate you. We know you worked hard on that. I'm just saying, I think the headwinds are against people who are serving in churches. And you are the really important connector between now, pastors try to do this. I think I'm almost sure I speak for all of us, but there's not enough of us to go around to do that for all of our officers all the time. But you are a team of people. You're the ones that ask these people to do this service. Couldn't you be the ones to have their backs, to back them up, to pray for them, to send them a note, to say thank you so much? And let me just say that if we will take seriously this opportunity to encourage officers, when you get to the fall and you are asking people to serve, your job's going to be a lot easier if people feel equipped and if they feel encouraged. So we had tonight, because I thought, I'm excited about the different things that I shared in August. to help the process of nominating representative officer groups and taking on the healthy practices of rotation. And I think you have more people to draw from than you think, whether you're a small church or a large church. And I think all of that is really important. But I think because there just wasn't time to do these other things, to talk about equipping people and to talk about encouraging people. But if you will do that, then the other part of enlisting people is going to be much easier in the fall. If people feel appreciated and if they feel supported and equipped. So that was very important to me to have time to do. So anybody have any questions? I've dumped a lot in your lap. Anybody have any answers? Okay. So I want to leave you with homework that comes from the first session. It is a worksheet. Avila, can you put it up there for them to see? This is something I gave out in August. And I asked committees, people who are on the nominations, to keep this worksheet in mind and to come to their first meeting with names. And I'm offering it to you tonight because it's a great thing to do in the fall, but it's a better thing if you start it in January and you keep this with you. So look all year long for who are your underutilized members. Who are underutilized. And then look for people who used to be officers in the church, but they're not anymore. Now, people are leaving leadership a lot these days. Now, that could be from their own physical health, that they needed to take a break. It could be for family caregiving. It could be from pressures in their jobs. They may have left leaders, been great leaders in your church, but they've left, they've gotten out of the loop. Sometimes they don't ever get asked back. And so who are those people that used to be leaders in your church who have left? Who's overutilized? Stop using overutilized people. And then watch all year long as people join your church. Every time somebody joins, somebody on your nominating committee needs to learn more about them. Now, every group in the church is not set up for new members. Nominations will be one. Don't put brand new people on a nominating committee. Nominating committee needs to be people who know the church. But if you have somebody join the church who's an interior designer or who's a contractor, put them on trustees. You don't have to have any prior experience with the congregation to really be great with that. I mean, I'm just saying, but pay attention right now, beginning right now. And so that when you get to August, you're going to have all kinds of names. Your pools are always larger than we think. And the August session was about not sitting down and going, oh my gosh, who can we ask to be on staff parish? Or, oh my gosh, I don't know if we can get enough people to be on trustees. People are there. They're just not in front of you. They're just not foremost in your mind. So this is kind of a take home for you to begin to think of now and do it. You'll need to kind of revisit that when it's time to make your actual nominations. And it may be that this year you've got people who are not available for membership. Keep them on a list. You may need to ask them next year, or you may have a resignation, and that may be a time that this person is free. We got to do a better job at keeping our pools together, because another discouraging thing about your job is thinking, oh, there's not enough people. We'll never get that nominations thing filled out. There are people. We're just not used to thinking about who they are and engaging them. Okay, thank you. So I had a question of I don't remember, would I be available to talk or even come to a church and meet with them? Absolutely. I'd be thrilled to. I'm flunking retirement. So, and just, I mean, I would be glad to. And this would be a joy. I mean, we need our churches to be healthy. I want your work to be exciting. I want you to know how important your work is to the health of your church. And so email me. You can call me. I mean, whatever. I'm in the conference journal. So anybody else have a question or something that you'd like to say or ask? Has this been helpful? If you're on the screen, we do a thumbs up or a thumbs down. I want this to be helpful to you. Okay, thank you. I have scriptures to close with. I'm a big fan of scripture guiding everything we do, and I hope you hear the recurring themes in the scripture will match up with the practical advice that I've tried to give you. And the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, and we have seen his glory, the glory of the Father's only Son, full of grace and truth. Grace and truth. And may you always be doing those good, kind things that show that you are children of God, for this will bring much praise and glory to the Lord. Let us pray. Dear God, I want to thank you for every child of yours who has said yes to this important leadership placement, enlistment, equipping, encouraging ministry in your church. I know, and you know, how very important their work for you is. And now I pray that you will take what has been offered, and use it like you did loaves and fishes. It's a small offering compared to their big task, but may it be blessed by you, and may it bring nourishment and health and joy and new vitality to each church represented here. And may we always be looking for your will to be done on earth the way it is in heaven. Through Christ we pray. Amen. Thanks to each of you. I'd be glad to hear from you.
Thank you all for joining us this evening. We will follow up within the next few days with links to all of the resources that were shared tonight. So in case you weren't able to grab those from the chat or from the Whova app, we'll email those out. This workshop was really focused on your role in equipping and encouraging your leaders. But I'm going to share that. I feel like I'm spamming you with this Nominations 101 link. But if you are interested in learning more about how to identify leadership to nominate in the fall, please check out that Nominations 101 recording where Mary John really gives you a lot of really good practical ideas for how to do that. This webinar recording, I'm told it's going to be available in Whova, but this is our first time using Whova, so we're going to see how quickly that recording is available there. Eventually, all Equip and Connect workshops, not just this one, but everything, I think there are 38 this week, are going to be available on our online learning platform. So I am putting that link in the chat as well. Please note that new workshops were being added even as late as last week. So depending on when you registered, there might be some new options that you didn't know about before. So be sure to take a look at the website or in your Whova app to see if there's anything new that you want to check out. Thank you all so very much.
And we want to say thank you to Havilah, because I can do my part, but we wouldn't have had this without her. So thank you. And for this to all be available, friends, this is amazing. And so if you were asking somebody to serve on finance and they weren't sure, they can go to this online learning platform and get help from two of the best people in the whole world, who would also meet with an individual or with an individual finance committee. If our leaders are in trouble or if they have questions, we've got people who can help, and they're making it available in remarkable ways. So thank you, Havilah.
Absolutely. Thank you all. Have a
Y'all
wonderful
have a good
evening.
night. Thank you so much for coming.